What is up, everybody? It's Tony here on Button Mash Programming. I'm actually going to be closing my Twitch right here so that's not distraction for myself or for anybody else. Just to get into it today, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the assignment that I had originally assigned. Um, so, the assignment I had originally I had signed, I believe yesterday, was basically to generate two integers, two numbers, have them multiply to each other, and create an if statement uh, depending on what the user answered. So if the user was correct, have it display an answer, have it display the answer representing that the person got the answer correct. And if they got it incorrect, have it display a different message if the answer was incorrect. There's a lot of notes here. Please don't let this freak you out or overwhelm you. A lot of this commented out stuff is going to be part of our lesson today. So it's just to make things a little bit easier on myself. It'll make a lot more sense once we go over it. So, anyways, here I go. So first of all, we're going to run the program, and I'm going to go again line for line of how we solved, how we were supposed to solve the homework. So, first of all, what is 11 times 9? I forgot to put some spaces there, but it's asking what is 11 times 9. So, 11 times 9 is 99. We know that, but we're going to actually make the answer incorrect because I want I want to show you what it does. So we'll just say 81. Oops, try again. The console closed. Again, we're going to reopen the console. Push Control F5 on your keyboard when I have no idea why it's not running. Okay, there we go. What is 11 times 9? We'll say 99. Great job. Your answer is right. So, essentially how we have done this is we're going to start with the correct answer. So, first of all, what I have done here is you'll notice that I created the integer number 1, well, num1, is equal to 11. So, basically, the first thing you're doing is you're creating an integer, you're giving it the integer a name, and then you're equaling it to a number. So again, integer number 1 is equal to 11. And then we're repeating the same thing for the second number, so the 9. So this is represented of the 9. Integer num2 is equal to 9. So the first thing and foremost what we did here was we created two integers representing both numbers. Now, of course, the user doesn't see that information. A lot of that information is in the back end for the programmers. Now, the question is, how did I get it to display, and why is there no space between there? I'm glad I actually made this mistake because it gives me an opportunity to show you guys what went wrong here. Now, it's actually really funny on what went wrong. So here, write to console, what is 11 times 9? So console, this is where it's asking the question, what is 11 times 9? Now, the question is, like I showed you before, console.writeLine, because you want it all to display, on the line there, and the answer will apply on a separate line, but we'll go over that later. So, why is there no spaces between there, and why does it look so weird? Well, it's actually just this right here. All I need to do is, and I always tell people this because for the longest time, it's funny, I couldn't actually figure out why it would never space things out for me. And really, all it is between the commas, make sure you're leaving spaces between those things. That way, it doesn't actually show you that. So now, if I rerun it, Control F5, now it's spaced out, as you can see. And again, we'll bring it back to the correct answer, 99. So, the next portion of the equation is basically, so now that we've input a now that we've input a number value for integer 1 and integer number 1 and integer number 2, and we got it to display what we got it to display the equation, asking the user to answer the question. Now, the next thing you need to do is you need to take the numbers. So take the integer number 1 and convert it to a number. So give it the number value of equals 11. So we create an integer called, I apologize, give me 1 second actually. So I apologize. So what we're actually doing now is, now because we've already given these values, we don't actually need to convert these into values. But what we're actually doing here now is we're creating an integer called answer. Okay? So because it is going to resemble what is 11 times 9 and what 11 times 9 are equal to, we need to convert the word answer into a number value and have the console read the value based on the equation that is being displayed, which is 11 times 9. So now that we've done that, so as you can see here, this is where it is converting as I explained, it is converting the integer called answer into a number value and allowing the console to read it as the number value. So now we're going to place our if statements, okay? So basically we're saying here, if the answer, so the integer answer is equal to, so again, like we talked about last time, two equal signs represent equal to, is equal to number 1 times number 2, and this is in brackets again, because those are the conditions of the if statement. So basically all this is saying is, if the answer is equal to number 1 times number 2, then ... and then we're going to place the opening bracket to open a function. So something that is going to happen as the then, right? So place the opening bracket for the function, as I said here. So we open a function, and basically the message that is going to be, we just ultimately write the message in this case, or the function that is going to happen, but in this case it's just a message to the user if they've got the answer correct. So again, how we do that is console.writeLine. We place a parentheses, and in the parentheses we place quotations, and within our quotations we write our correct statement. So if you can say you got it right, whatever, I just said great job, your answer is correct. Now here, again, right after we've created the function for if the answer is correct, we close our function bracket with another squiggly bracket. Now, if the answer is incorrect, we just place an else statement. There are no function necessary for an else statement, because it's, in this case, it's either right or wrong. If we wanted it to display something slightly different, depending on what the user has answered and depending what the question is, there's other ways to do that, as I explained earlier in my last video. It's else-if statements. Else being the last statement, because ultimately there's no other option. So then basically we're saying, if the answer is incorrect, then what we're going to do is we're going to write please try again. And then, as I had mentioned before, what we want to do in between or after our else statement, we also want to make sure we open our function bracket. Now again, ignore all these messages. These messages are going to make more sense once we get into today's lesson. But what this is here is basically we want to open up the function bracket. It's up here, sorry. So we want to open the function bracket. So the function bracket is now open, and then it's going to print, please try again. So the incorrect display. So what is going to be displayed to the user if they get the answer incorrect? And then we close that with another function bracket, because that is the end of that else function. Now, the problem with this code is that you are constantly running the same code, meaning that you are constantly running the same equation, and you're running the same. You're getting the same answer every time. So the question becomes, how do we generate a random question or a random equation that will give us a different answer each time? So getting into it, we're actually going to be talking about switch statements and generating random equations. Alright, so we no longer need that, sorry. Those are just notes for myself. Okay, so now we're going to start from the top again, and we're actually going to use this very, very same equation. So if you used this equation earlier, fantastic. Basically, or if you've written it down, you can, or if you don't have it, you can pause the video and write it down. So just like we created a class called main. Well, we didn't necessarily. There's a class called main in our class. Just like we created a class called main. So what happens within main, the class called main, is all of the stuff that we actually created. So it's basically running the equation 9 times 11. So that is our class. Our class called main, sorry. So if we want to randomly generate a number, believe it or not, random is a class as well. It has many different methods that it can run, so it's not necessarily strictly based on to randomly generate a number, but as you'll be able to see, is that it can also randomly generate responses depending on different responses you've written. This is actually very useful for if you're making a game, if you want something to randomly spawn, if you want something to randomly happen, this will essentially create that create that function. Now, I apologize. I was just making sure that I went over all these things in the notes. Okay. So, now what we're going to do is we are going to take out the comment. So, as I mentioned before, I actually commented these out just so that when I'm going over the video with you guys, it'll make a little more sense. So, what this is basically we are going to, so if I take this out actually for a second, just to show you guys. So, if I type in the word random, okay? This random is, as I mentioned to you before, random is a class with more than one function. So, random, it's obvious what we're going to do based on the name is we're going to randomly generate a number. And we're going to call that function so that when we need it later in our code, we're going to call it new random. the parentheses and the semi and the and that particular code is very important, and we'll need it later in the code, but we don't need it quite now. It'll make a little more sense why we need it. So, um, so what we want to do is we want to create an integer for number 1 and generate a random number for int number 1. We also want to make sure the number is positive and place a minimum and maximum value in our parentheses. So again, when I mentioned before, our brackets will become useful. That's where the minimum and maximum value go. The minimum value, keep in mind, is where the value starts. So if we start at 1, it could possibly call the number 1. If we start the value at if we do the max value at 10, that is 10 is not where as high as it's going to go. It will only go up to 9. So just keep that in mind when you are programming later, that if you want the value to be 10, you better set your max value to 11. So now we're going to comment this in. We don't need this line anymore because we're replacing it with that. So now, as you can see, it's almost basically the same format as our other one. So we have int number 1, and instead of equaling a number, we're going to say number generator dot next. So essentially we want the integer to be random every time. And you can see here that I've placed the values with 1 and 11. So it'll be between 1 and 10 essentially. So it can call anywhere from 1 to 10. You know what? And we could even set it to 12. That way it'll be between 1 and 11. So int number 1. And the last thing, so I put random. So basically we called we called the variable number generator. I apologize, I should have made that clear. And this right here is what initializes the new instance of the random class. So basically, this is new random number. It's going to display a new random number every time. So this is just so it doesn't display the same random number every time. But the actual variable, and I'm sorry for confusing this earlier, the variable is called number generator. So int number 1 is equal to, and that's the name of our variable. You can even see it says local variable, dot next. Now, what is dot next? Well, dot next is actually making sure that the number stays in a positive value, that it does not give the number a negative value. So that's all that is. So just keep that in mind. If you want to keep a positive number, make sure you write dot next. The next one we want to do is, again, we have this variable here, but we want to also make this one a random number. We don't want it to equal 9 anymore, or you could if you want for the second variable, but we want them both randomized in this case. So now we could even set different values if we want. You know what? We'll do that just for the sake of doing this. All right. So this one is the integer called number 2 is going to call the variable to generate a random number in a positive value between the numbers 1 through 10. Better yet, I apologize. Okay. So that's the explanation of what that line is. From there, what we want to do is, again, we want to write to console. So we want it to say to the user, what is, And again, we kept this the same. We didn't need to change this. Write to console what is, in this case, our random number. Our random number times our other random number. So again, we have console dot writeLine, because this is what is going to be displayed to the user. What is, and it's calling variable number 1, so whatever number is randomly generated between 1 and 12, times whatever number is randomly generated for number 2, the variable called num2, and then it's going to show a question mark. Remember, the plus sign does not mean that we are adding. It just means, so this is in quotations, plus, so what is this number times this number, and then a question mark. So now we want to create an integer for the answer to convert it convert the int. So again, we want the system to read what the numbers it gave the system and eventually solve the equation. But we just wanted to accept the input for number 1 and number 2. So, and change it to the number value that was randomly generated. So again, we've created an integer called answer. Okay, the integer called answer is equal to convert to int 32. So convert the number 1 and number 2 to the value that was randomly generated, and input it, and basically read the input the user inputted. Or sorry, and read the input that was given to the input that was randomly generated. The next, again, we're going to use an if statement here. Now, the if statement is, again, we want to place an if statement, so we want to say the word if and place our conditions within the if statement. So put in an if statement with the conditions for if the user provides the correct answer. So again, we go if the answer is equal, so if the answer is equal to number 1 times number 2, then display this message here. Sorry, this message here, that you are right. The only difference between switch statements really and else if statements is, rather than just saying else if, so if I were writing an else if statement, it would be else if the user gets within this many, between this and this within the answer, then display this message. Else if, display this message. If they display between this and this, rather than giving it multiple responses and writing multiple lines of code, like I mentioned before, we want to get more work done with doing less lines of code. So we want to essentially get more work done, but don't work as hard to get it. Because the more lines of code there is, the more it can be confusing to people that are trying to read it or trying to use your code. So what we're going to do now is, instead of saying else if, we want it to randomly now display a random message. So if I take this here, and I'm going to show you, this is now commented in, this randomly generates a response depending on the responses set up. So basically, this is just saying, if the answer is incorrect, display one of these messages. So we created an integer called response index. okay, is equal to number generator dot next between 1 and 4. Now, this may be a little bit confusing. This may be a little bit confusing to you, but really, it's taking the I apologize. It's taking the numbers and basically displaying one of these messages to you. So now, sorry, give me a second here. Okay, so now what we have here is the so an integer called response index is equal to number generator dot next. So randomly generate a number again between 1 and 4. So the response, give me 1 second here, didn't like that, and I think I know why. Yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, so make sure, as you can see there, I typed something differently and it didn't like it because it said, well, no, that integer doesn't exist. So what you want to do here is it's going to generate a number between 1 and 4. Now 1 and 4 no longer resembles one of these here down here, because else is a separate becomes a separate condition from what was necessarily done up here. So what it's actually displaying is between cases 1 to default, or sorry, cases, I apologize, this should be 3. Cases 3 to default, or case 1. Okay, so how we do this is now it's basically saying try between 1 and 3, not 1 and 4. So switch. The switch, basically, it's going to say, what this means essentially is switch the response every time the user gets the answer incorrect to one of these 3 messages here. So I took the response index from the integer response index that I created up above and put it into the conditions for my switch. So it's saying randomly generate one of these. Again, I'm going to open up a function bracket with a squiggly bracket. I know squiggly bracket is not the name of it, but I'm just using that as terminology. Just to make it easier on myself, that's all I call it. Sorry about that. So console, what we're going to do now is we're going to write case 1. So this doesn't mean something in particular other than randomly generate case 1, case 2, or default. It doesn't mean anything more than that at this point. So now, if they get it wrong, display one of these messages, essentially. Console.WriteLine try using a calculator is one of my random messages. The second random message is console.WriteLine wrong again. And the last case where the person gets the answer correct, it says incorrect. Now, it doesn't display these answers in any particular order. It's just going to randomly do it. Don't depend the numbering on that. What the numbering is more so for is that it could try any one of these scenarios. Now, make sure you are placing a break between each case so it knows where it begins, where case 3 begins and ends. So that's where it begins and that's where it ends. So break followed by a semicolon. As we mentioned before, semicolon usually ends a specific line of coding. And as you can see, case 2, and we end it with a break. Case 3, default, sorry, and break. So, we no longer need this message because that is no longer applicable to what we need. Okay, so again, I just want to see where this ends. So, okay, we're good. All right, so now I can launch my console. if it lets me. Control F5. Nope. Didn't like that either. Control F5. There we go. For some reason it was playing with me for a second there. Okay. So now, what is 11 times 7? See, and I didn't randomly generate that number. I didn't pick that number. It randomly generated. So we can say, let's say 88, just for the sake of getting it wrong. Incorrect. All right, so then, Control F5 again. We can say, oh, what is 8 times 2? 8 times 2 is, we'll say, it's 16, I know, trust me. But I'm going to say 15. Wrong again, see? And it's just randomly displaying the message. Now, if I get it correct, just to test if the code is actually working, we can try it correct. 15 is the answer, and great job, you are right. So, another thing you can do is if you want to continuously run this code so that it keeps asking questions, and I think we talked about this earlier. I think it's something like return to start. Oh, I apologize. It's not return to, it's go to. That's why. Sorry about that. I just kind of blanked out there for a sec. Go to start. Okay. And I spelled start wrong. Wow, I'm special. Okay, so now, as you can see at the beginning of the code, I wrote start followed by a colon, and then I wrote go to start followed by a semicolon. So Control F5. What is it? 1 times 5. We know the answer to that is 5. Okay, now it's asking me what is 4 times 8. 8, 16, 24, 32. But we're going to say it's 35 for the sake of getting it wrong. And it asks me another question. So as you can see, this is just using math equations for it. But the possibilities of it randomly of this are endless. This is actually a very good lesson for when you want to randomly generate things in a game, or if you're trying to debug something, this can actually help you as well. I always recommend using the go to start just because it's kind of a pain when your code automatically closes after it's run once. But I'll tell you when and when not to use it. There are certain things you obviously don't want to use it for because you do not want to create an endless code. Ultimately, that can wreck some things on your computer. Alright, so that concludes this lesson. So just a little assignment for you. What I'd like you guys to do when you have a chance. First of all, if you go to... what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create a generated random generated response for if the user is correct as well. So as opposed to it just saying great job, you're right every time, I want it to display another message. I want it to display another message each time or multiple times. Again, I also want you to set the go to start, so basically so that it will keep prompting for more questions. This will be a good test to see if you understood what was going on. You can also, something I'd like you to also do is you can create a third integer for this and have that one randomly generated with some criteria. And again, I'm a firm believer in work hard, play hard. There is something you guys can do on your spare time, and something you can do on your spare time is go to. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Flash 5, all one word. This guy, again, is absolutely hilarious. He does random videos about random 5 things. Random 5 things. It can be anything. It could be anything based on, from anything based on to celebrities, to pictures that shock people, great films, or why an actor is good, for an example, as well. Thank you again for tuning into Button Mash Programming. I really, really appreciate all the love and support that I'm getting from this, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to review this as well. So thank you again, and best of luck with the homework. Hopefully, be doing another video today. Again, don't feel rushed. I am just working through these videos, getting them up, as well as if you like, you can always pause it. It'll be on my YouTube channel, and you can just find my YouTube channel called Button Mash. Sorry, called Button Mash Programming. And it's the first link there. It's the only one called Button Mash Programming. And I have a few videos there already. Or you can check me out on Twitch. Just search for Varga Ultra. That's V as in Victor, ARGA, ULTRA. And that is all one word. I will be posting videos there as well as my YouTube channel, so you can follow along. So again, thank you for following along. Continue to watch, continue to learn. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Have a great day, everyone, and I appreciate your time.